So here's tangent with all the parts to it. And so what we know here is that this 2 is on the outside, so therefore it's being added, therefore it has to be a D. It is not an A. This 2 is being multiplied to the tangent, and it's outside, so that has to be the A. This 2 has to be the B because it's inside and it's being multiplied to the X. And this is added. It's supposed to be the C, but if we remember from first semester, you cannot have that B um, right next to the X. You have to factor it out. So in order for us to factor it out, that means that we are dividing by 2 in everything. But dividing by 2, and this is a fraction, we don't want to do that. So we multiply it by 1/2. Dividing by 2 and multiplying by a half is the same thing. So if I rewrite this, it's going to be y is equal to, I'm going to move the d to the standard place. The reason why they put it in the front is so that they don't mix it with c, something that's inside of the tangent. So here's the 2 tangent, and then we are going to factor out the 2. So we're going to have the x. And when I factor out the 2, it's going to make it plus 3 pi over 8. And then the plus 2, which is your d. So this is the standard position. So now we do have everything. This is your A, this is your B, this is your C, and this is your D. Now, the same thing happens before. The vertical shift is found from your D. The phase shift is found from your C. The period is found from your B. And the amplitude is usually found from your A. Because tangent is unbounded, they consider it not to have an amplitude, but there is a definite stretch and shrink vertically. So the the y values are being multiplied by 2. So the phase shift doesn't change. It's still going to be the opposite of that. So the phase shift is going to be negative 3 pi over 8. The vertical shift is going to be shifted up 2. And the period is going to be found. It's tangent. So it has a period of pi, the parent function does. And then we need to multiply it or modify it with the b. The b is 2, so it's supposed to stretch it. But because it's inside, it does the opposite. It's going to shrink it. And so you're going to divide it by 2 or multiply this by 1/2, which is the same thing. So this is going to be pi over 2. The new period is going to be done in the terms of just pi over 2, not full pi. And then the amplitude, there is none, but we are still stretching it. All the y values are still going to be multiplied by 2. Now, what's the order of doing this? We would start with the period. The period is the first thing we want to do. So the period we're going to do is we're going to split it up still into 4 equal parts. So the period of pi over 2 gets to be multiplied by 1/4 or divided by 4. It's the same thing. So we're going to get pi over 8. So the first tick mark is going to be pi over 8. The second tick mark is going to be 2 pi over 8, and then 3 pi over 8, and then 4 pi over 8. So we know that that's going to reduce to pi over 4, and this one's going to reduce to pi over 2, which is what we said the period is going to be. So if we remember the tangent from the parent function over here that we did earlier in the previous video, it is between pi over 2 and negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. That's the whole tangent. And we know at pi over 4, it's going to be split up on there. And this is the pi over 2. And then here's the pi. So we're still going to split this up on there into 4 equal parts. And so these 4 equal parts, I'm not going to go all the way to pi, 2 pi in the standard parent function. I'm just going to go all the way to pi. And so this one here is going to be pi over 8. This one here is going to be pi over 4, 3 pi over 8. And this one here is going to be pi over 2. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And so we're going to have negative pi over 8, negative pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, pi over 2. And so I have stretched this. So if I were to look back on what I have stretched on there, it from all the way over here is that the first tick mark is pi over 4, which is my pi over 8, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and pi. So if we go back over here, this pi over 8 is supposed to be the pi over 4. And this, I'm just going to change the color so we could see. So this one's supposed to be the pi over 4. This one's going to be the pi over 2, the 3 pi over 4, and the pi. So that's what we've done. We're supposed to have stretched. So we're supposed to have stretched it. What we actually did was shrink it. So whatever we were doing in terms all the way in pi, now everything's going to happen at pi over 2. So we know at pi over 4 is supposed to be 1. At pi over 2, you're going to have those asymptotes. So we're still going to have these asymptotes right there. And then we're also going to have the asymptotes here at pi over 4. And so whatever happens on the unit circle, if I know it's happening at pi over 2, it's going to happen at 2 pi over 7. And then here at 0, the tangent is 0. It's supposed to be the tangent is 0 there and the tangent of 0. So here's what we have there. So we've done the period. We've actually shrunk everything into terms of what happened in pi is going to happen at pi over 2. But we also, before we start putting in the zeros, we want to be able to shift it up. So in order for us to shift it up, I'm going to do that in green. We're going to do this vertical shift. The x-axis is now going to shift up. So this is the easiest way to do it. So the whole x-axis is now going to shift up to 2. So this one here, I'm going to make each tick mark equal to 1. And then this is 4. This is -2. This is -4. So it's going to shift up by 2. So now this here is my new x-axis. It is no longer the black x-axis. So this one here has now been shifted up. So everything's going to be there. So I know that the tangent was supposed to be at 0 here. So now it's supposed to be down here, but now I'm going to put it up there. And then if it happens at 0, it's also going to happen at pi, which is now pi over 2. And whatever happened there is not going to happen at negative pi over 2. So that's where the zeros are now. So we are done with that. We shifted that up by 2. Now what happens at the next thing that I want to do is, and I'll do it in purple, is what has to be at pi over 4 was supposed to be at 1. So at 1, what happens is it's going to be 2. So because I'm multiplying, this is what we're doing next, is 2. So it's supposed to be at pi over 4 is supposed to be 1, but now we're going to multiply it by 2, so it's supposed to be at 2 a stretch. But then it got shifted up by 2, so that means that this is where it's supposed to be now at 4. And then at -1, it's supposed to be -2, but then it got shifted up 2 units, so now we're right here. So now we have 0, this here, and we have those asymptotes. And so this one here, this one is going to be the one above, and then this one here is supposed to be the one below. So it's supposed to look like this, and I'm just going to put really, really small dotted lines because we have stretched it, we have shrunk it, and we have shifted it up. So this is what it's supposed to look like. But we haven't done the phase shift. The phase shift is moving left or right. So the shift left or right. So the last one that I am going to do, I am going to do it in blue. So that's the last one that I'm going to do is I'm shifting everything. So the points that I already have are now going to be shifted in the negative direction by 3 pi over 8. Since I'm going in if I'm going to the left, that means I'm going to start at this point right here, and I am going to shift it over 3 pi over 8. That means that I'm going to do 3 of them. This is the 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8. That means I have to do 3 tick marks. So this one's going to go to the left over, and it's going to go 1, 2, 3. So now this is the new point. Now this point's going to go over 3 too. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3. That's going to shift over that way. And then this asymptote is now going to shift as well. Everything shifts. So it was supposed to be at pi over 4. So it's 1, 2, 3. So now here is our new asymptote. And at that asymptote, if I look at the pattern, this one here is going to be up here. And so, and then here there's supposed to be a new asymptote because I could see the pattern that's happening, and it's going to look like this. And so everything's going to be shifted just over. So if I look at this, this is the asymptote. So at this part, it's supposed to be here. At this one is here. This one is here. And now here is the other asymptote's going to go like this. And that's what it's going to look like. So the final graph is the blue. So the graph of this part right there, after all that, it is the blue 2 periods. And that's how you graph with everything.